Nobody is talking about Dillon Gabriel. That is the first and most important truth about this entire story. In a quarterback room that has generated more headlines, more debates, more national television segments, more viral social media moments, and more organizational drama than any depth chart in the entire National Football League this offseason, the player sitting at number 3, the player whose roster spot has been the subject of more speculation and dismissal and organizational doublespeak than almost anyone else on the Cleveland Browns' 53-man roster, is barely being mentioned. Watson dominates the conversation. Sanders dominates the conversation. Taylon Green's 40-yard dash keeps popping up. The Shiloh sandwich keeps getting replayed. The Cabot report keeps getting analyzed. And somewhere in the background of all of it, a 25-year-old quarterback from Oregon is showing up to work every day in Berea, learning Todd Monken's offense, competing for every rep, and waiting for the football world to notice that his story is more complicated and more consequential than the dismissive framing it has received since the moment he was drafted. Tonight, we reveal the truth about Dillon Gabriel's future with the Cleveland Browns. Not the headline version, the one that says he is basically irrelevant and his days in Cleveland are numbered. The actual truth. The full picture. The version that includes what the insiders who know this coaching staff are saying about him, what his rookie season actually looked like when you examine it beyond the win-loss record, what the specific reasons are that nobody inside the Browns organization wants to simply cut him loose, what 2 NFC teams are already circling him as a potential trade target, what Tony Grossi's prediction means if it proves accurate, and what the most uncomfortable truth about the Dillon Gabriel situation reveals about the Cleveland Browns' entire organizational approach to the quarterback position. Subscribe right now. This is the story that is hiding in plain sight. Let's go. The beginning of the Dillon Gabriel story with Cleveland starts with a decision that still generates debate among the analysts who cover this franchise most closely. Because the decision to draft Gabriel in the 3rd round of the 2025 NFL Draft with the 62nd overall pick was, by almost every evaluation, a reach. Not just a slight reach. A meaningful reach that prioritized one specific type of quarterback attribute over the others in a way that the critics have not fully forgiven. The Athletic tabbed Gabriel as a point guard-style quarterback, often too willing to bypass tight windows and settle for the checkdown, also pointing out his difficulty with deep passes. Heavy Sports wrote, taking Gabriel in the 3rd round last year remains an unjustifiable decision, as he doesn't seem to be in the team's plans. Yard Barker. Unjustifiable decision. Those are strong words from a publication that covers the Cleveland Browns seriously and without the performative negativity that some national outlets deploy. But the frustration behind them is football-specific and worth engaging with honestly. Gabriel at 62 overall represented an investment that placed him between the 2nd and 3rd round threshold, a pick position that historically corresponds to players who are expected to compete for starting roles within their first 2 contract years. And the specific profile of the player taken at that position raised legitimate concerns from the beginning. Gabriel was the Browns' first quarterback selected in the 2025 NFL Draft, despite Barry ultimately taking Sanders in the 5th round. As a rookie, he played in 10 games while starting 6 of them. Despite all the offensive woes he encountered, Gabriel managed to throw for 937 yards and 7 touchdowns while completing 59.5% of his attempts. He went 1-5 as a starter before suffering a concussion. Dogs by nature. 10 games. 6 starts. 1-5. 937 yards. 7 touchdowns. Those are the numbers that define Gabriel's rookie season in the most surface-level way. But the surface level is where his evaluation gets stuck, where analysts read the record and the yardage and the completion percentage and conclude that the 3rd-round pick who was supposed to be one step ahead of the 5th-round pick in the depth chart hierarchy produced less valuable football than the 5th-round pick who replaced him. And technically, that conclusion is correct. Sanders finished the season with a better record and a more compelling narrative than Gabriel. The coaching staff that deployed them, the Stefanski staff, not the Monken staff, gave Sanders the opportunity in the second half of the season and Sanders produced 2 division wins. But here is the truth that Gabriel's most unfair critics are not acknowledging. The context. Gabriel threw for just 170 yards per game in his first 5 starts. His decision-making was not as sharp as it had been in college, and his size, propensity for checkdowns, and inability to throw downfield were glaring weaknesses at the NFL level. Yard Barker. Every single one of those weaknesses operated in an environment that maximized them. The propensity for checkdowns, which sounds like a character flaw until you understand that checkdowns are the rational decision of a quarterback who was reading correctly and concluding that no downfield option is open, was more pronounced because the receiver room in 2025 gave him almost no legitimate downfield options. You cannot throw deep when nobody can separate deep. The inability to throw downfield itself a debatable characterization of a quarterback who completed 59.5% of his passes across 6 starts under severe pressure was exacerbated by an offensive line that gave the pocket time of a pinball machine. And the 5-1 record, the win-loss that defines his contribution in the history books, reflects the 11-loss season the team was having before, during, and after his starts. The concussion. The one that ended his season in Week 11 and handed the starting job to Sanders. That specific medical event, occurring at the precise moment when Gabriel had survived enough early season turbulence to potentially find a rhythm, is the unseen variable in every analysis of his 2025 performance. He was not benched. He was not yanked for Sanders due to poor performance. He suffered a head injury that removed him from the field. The narrative that Sanders displaced him through superior performance is not fully accurate. The opportunity arose because of injury. And the coaching staff that was deploying them made the decision to continue with Sanders when Gabriel returned from the concussion protocol rather than returning the started role to the player who had held it before the injury. That decision, to stay with Sanders after the Gabriel concussion rather than reset the depth chart, is itself evidence of organizational ambivalence about Gabriel's standing in the quarterback competition that predated the Monken era. And it is the backdrop against which the Monken staff's assessment of him has a specific significance. Browns insider Mary Kay Cabot stated, "They're not keeping Gabriel on the roster just to trade him. The new coaching staff has liked what it's seen of him so far this offseason and believe he's worth a longer look." With Green on board, those two will essentially vie for the developmental spot, while Watson and Sanders battle for the starting job. Sharp football analysis. Worth a longer look. That phrase from the most credible Browns insider in professional football is the single most important piece of information about Gabriel's future that has been published since the 2026 draft concluded. Not kept for trade purposes. Not kept out of contractual obligation. Kept because the Monken staff has observed something in the offseason program that makes them believe there is a football player worth continuing to evaluate. Cabot elaborated, "Dillon Gabriel is a player who can challenge for the number 3 quarterback job on this team. He's someone that has demonstrated a good grasp of the Todd Monken offense. Dillon really didn't get a fair chance last year. The Browns realize there is some merit to him as a future quality quarterback in the NFL." Sharp football analysis. A good grasp of the Todd Monken offense. This is the specific detail that changes the entire frame on Gabriel's situation. Because Monken's offense, the graduate-level football strategy we examined in our last video, is not a system that every quarterback grasps quickly. It demands pre-snap processing. It requires the specific mental agility to identify coverage before the snap, check into the right play based on that coverage, and then execute with precision and efficiency at a speed the defense cannot adjust to. It is the kind of offense that punishes quarterbacks who are slow processors while specifically rewarding quarterbacks who can read defenses accurately and efficiently at the line of scrimmage. Gabriel, by every evaluation that has been done of his college career and his professional performance, is an exceptional pre-snap processor. The point guard comparison that The Athletic used, while intended somewhat critically, as a player who avoids risk by settling for the safe play, is actually a genuine strength in Monken's system. A point guard who sees the floor clearly, who finds the open man quickly, who avoids turning the ball over by recognizing when the shot is there and when it is not, that archetype produces efficient football in the specific way that Monken's offense generates points. Not through individual brilliance or explosive athleticism. Through consistent, intelligent, reliable execution. Monken said during the post-minicamp press conference, "I thought all 3 quarterbacks, at times you could see the positives in their game and learning the new system. They've been awesome in the meeting rooms and on the field." Sharp football analysis. Awesome in the meeting rooms. For a quarterback whose primary attribute is mental processing speed, being described as awesome in the meeting rooms is not a consolation prize. It is the specific validation of the trait that makes him potentially valuable to this specific coaching staff. Monken is not looking for the quarterback who does the most impressive things on the field during half-speed spring practices. He is looking for the quarterback who has the mental framework to run his offense correctly, the one who, when the play is installed, understands not just what to do but why, and can carry that understanding into game preparation and execution. Gabriel, apparently, has that framework. More naturally than anyone expected. And that is the truth that the national conversation about his imminent departure is missing. The Tony Grossi prediction is the single piece of information that simultaneously represents the most pessimistic view of Gabriel's future in Cleveland and the most honest assessment of where the depth chart is likely to settle. Browns insider Tony Grossi recently predicted how many games each Browns quarterback will start this season. It's impossible to predict. Nevertheless, Watson 12, Sanders 4, Gabriel 1, Green 0. Bleacher Report. Watson 12. Sanders 4. Gabriel 1. Green 0. The prediction is explicit in its hierarchy and its pessimism toward the bottom of the room. By Grossi's assessment, and Grossi, who has been covering the Cleveland Browns for decades, is not a man who makes these predictions carelessly. Gabriel's most likely role in 2026 is emergency insurance. The quarterback who starts one game because Watson and Sanders have both been unavailable simultaneously. The backstop against the disaster scenario where the two primary options are both unavailable for a meaningful stretch. One start. In a 17-game season. For a third-round pick whose development was supposed to be a point of organizational investment rather than a footnote in the quarterback competition story. But here is the specific truth about the one-start prediction that makes it less bleak than it initially appears. One start means Grossi expects Gabriel to be on the roster for the full season. Not cut. Not traded. On the active roster, available, part of the organizational structure, contributing in the practice environment even when not playing in games. A player who earns one regular season start is a player who survived training camp, survived the preseason cuts, survived the week-to-week roster management of a team that carries 3 quarterbacks on the active roster with 1 on the practice squad. That survival, in a room that has 4 quarterbacks competing for 3 active spots, is its own evaluation result. Cabot added, Gabriel and Green should have plenty of chances to make their mark in the 3 preseason games. The Browns plan to keep 3 quarterbacks on the active roster, with 1 on the practice squad. If they believe that Green, who started 46 games in college, is ready for a Wildcat role, he'll make the 53-man roster. Even if he's not ready from the jump, the Browns probably can't expose him to the waiver wire at the end of camp to get him on the practice squad. CBS Sports. 3 on the active roster, 1 on the practice squad. This is the specific math that determines Gabriel's fate. If Green makes the 53 through his Wildcat potential, Gabriel loses an active roster spot and must either be traded or released. If Green is not ready, if the mechanics and the turnover concerns that drove him to the 6th round make him a practice squad-only player in year 1, then the 4th active roster spot is potentially available for Gabriel, who has the advantage of 1 year of system installation that Green does not have. The preseason games are therefore not a performance window for Gabriel in the traditional sense. They are a survival evaluation, the 3 games in which he must demonstrate, against real defenses, that his grasp of the Monken offense translates from the meeting room to the field in a way that justifies keeping him over the developmental project the team drafted to compete with him. The trade dimension is the one that generates the most external buzz around Gabriel's situation. And the specific details of the trade reporting, the teams identified, the framing used, the value assessment from the analyst who broke the story, tell you something important about how the broader NFL evaluates what Gabriel actually is. Christopher Knox of the Bleacher Report has named 2 NFC teams as possible landing spots for quarterback Dillon Gabriel. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons are emerging as potential suitors. If Gabriel ends up with the latter, he would reunite with his former head coach, Kevin Stefanski. Knox wrote, while teams won't be clamoring to add Gabriel as a potential starter, the 25-year-old should draw interest as a backup. The Browns will probably take what they can get for Gabriel, who should interest teams that lack a young developmental backup. Sharp football analysis. Teams won't be clamoring. But teams will draw interest. The specific distinction between clamoring and drawing interest tells you exactly what the trade market for Dillon Gabriel looks like at this moment, not a premium asset that sparks bidding wars, but a useful player at a legitimate position who has enough professional development and organizational familiarity to function as a backup in a new environment immediately. The kind of player that quality of depth-obsessed general managers identify in May as an available option that fills a specific need without requiring premium capital. The Falcons' connection, the Kevin Stefanski reunion, is the most intriguing of the two reported suitors. Because Stefanski knows Gabriel. He drafted him. He deployed him. He gave him his first professional starts and watched him develop through his first professional season with all of its difficulties. A coach who is now building something in Atlanta with a new organization has specific knowledge about this player that most potential trade partners lack, specific knowledge about his strengths, his development curve, his football intelligence, his coachability, and the specific NFL contexts in which he is most likely to succeed. Stefanski's knowledge of Gabriel is the trade value multiplier, the organizational reason a reunion makes football sense beyond the sentimental narrative it generates. The report suggests that Gabriel is a better fit for Stefanski than for the current Browns offense. A team with a different offensive style might get more from Gabriel's point guard approach than the run-first, play-action-heavy Monken system that favors playmaking and arm talent over efficient processing alone. Sharp football analysis. Better fit for Stefanski than for Monken. That is the honest football assessment that explains why the trade conversation exists at all. Every quarterback is more valuable in the specific system that maximizes his strengths. Gabriel's strengths, the pre-snap processing, the efficient checkdown game, the ball security that kept his turnover numbers manageable despite operating in chaos, are strengths in a West Coast-influenced system like the one Stefanski has historically run. They are less uniquely valuable in Monken's system, which is built around explosive play creation, quarterback athleticism, and the specific vertical passing concepts that require arm talent and downfield accuracy as primary weapons. The fit question is not a character flaw or a talent deficiency. It is a scheme alignment issue, and scheme alignment issues, in modern NFL roster construction, produce exactly the kind of trade conversations that the Bleacher Report is now reporting publicly. Barry knows Gabriel's strengths. He also knows Monken's system. And whether those two things align well enough to justify carrying Gabriel on the active roster through the entire 2026 season is the specific calculation that will produce whatever decision eventually ends this chapter of the story. The deepest truth about Dillon Gabriel's situation with the Cleveland Browns is the one that connects to the broader organizational question that multiple insiders have been asking publicly for months. The question about whether the future quarterback of this franchise is already on the roster, in any form, in any of the four current options, or whether it is currently playing college football somewhere with eligibility remaining. Jake Trotter of ESPN, formerly on the Browns beat before becoming the network's senior college football writer, dropped what he believes is a hard truth about the team's future at quarterback. This is what everybody has to realize, or come to the realization at some point soon. The future QB of the Cleveland Browns is in college right now. Even if the Browns win too many games to be out of the top 5 picks in next year's draft, the future is in college right now. Fox Sports. In college right now. Arch Manning. The player that multiple insiders have connected to Jimmy Haslam's personal enthusiasm, that the 2027 draft class is being constructed around, that represents the possibility of a genuine generational talent who might finally end the 41 quarterback parade that has defined Cleveland football for 25 years. If Trotter is right, if the organizational orientation is genuinely pointing toward 2027 as the resolution point for the franchise quarterback question, then Dillon Gabriel's role in 2026 is not about whether he can develop into the answer. It is about whether he can be valuable enough in the backup role to stay on the active roster through the end of the season and potentially contribute in the specific emergency situations where depth becomes the difference between a 7-win season and a 5-win season. Watson 12, Sanders 4, Gabriel 1. The Grossi prediction gives Gabriel one start, exactly one, in the 2026 season. That one start, if it occurs, does not happen in a vacuum. It happens because Watson and Sanders both missed time, because the organization needed its third quarterback for a meaningful professional game, and because the player who was there prepared, grasp of offense demonstrated, meeting room approved, was Dillon Gabriel. Bleacher Report. One start. The number that defines the specific, honest, unglamorous version of what Dillon Gabriel's 2026 Cleveland Browns career looks like if everything goes roughly as expected. Not the franchise quarterback. Not the backup-turned-starter narrative that makes for compelling football stories. The third option. A professional. The player who shows up, knows the system, does not turn the ball over, and makes the team better in practice regardless of whether he ever steps on the field in a game that counts. That is not the story of a wasted third-round pick. It is also not the story of a franchise investment that paid off the way the organization hoped. It is the story of a specific kind of professional football player, intelligent, prepared, system-fluent, physically limited by the standards the position demands at its highest level, trying to find his place in an organization that needs what he brings to the meeting room even as it searches for what he cannot consistently provide on the field. The most revealing thing that has been said about Gabriel's future in Cleveland did not come from a national analyst or a beat reporter or an organizational insider. It came from Todd Monken himself in the specific, diplomatic, football-honest language of a first-year head coach who was not ready to close any door and who has specific reasons, based on specific observation, for wanting every door to remain open through the full evaluation process. Monken said, "I thought all three quarterbacks at times you could see the positives in their game and learning the new system, and they've been awesome in the meeting rooms and on the field." Sharp football analysis. All three quarterbacks. Monken specifically did not say Watson and Sanders, with Gabriel mentioned as an afterthought. He said all three, Watson, Sanders, and Gabriel, have shown positives. Have been awesome in the meeting rooms. Have demonstrated something in the early stages of the new offensive installation that makes the head coach want to continue looking. That is not the language of a coach managing a player out of the building with diplomatic courtesy. It is the language of a coach whose evidence-based philosophy is telling him that the room is more competitive than the outside world is acknowledging. Monken also challenged the narrative of a two-man race before the draft, saying, "We just couldn't get past the draft and get right back to the quarterback." Anybody got some Miles questions too while we're at it? He insisted it was not a two-man race. Sharp football analysis. Not a two-man race. The head coach said it explicitly. Not Watson and Sanders with everyone else filling depth. A genuine competition, merit-based, open, determined by performance in the environments where performance can actually be evaluated, that includes Dillon Gabriel as a legitimate contestant for the third quarterback spot at minimum and theoretically for more if the circumstances break in directions nobody is currently anticipating. The truth about Dillon Gabriel's future with the Cleveland Browns is not the bleak, imminent departure narrative that social media has been running with since the moment Taylen Green was announced at pick 182. And it is not the optimistic star-in-waiting narrative that his college career suggested he might become. It is something more honest and more nuanced than either extreme. He is a 25-year-old quarterback who was not given a fair chance in his first professional season. Who demonstrated enough pre-snap intelligence and system fluency in the early stages of Todd Monken's offense to earn genuine organizational interest in a longer look. Who faces a training camp competition against four players, Watson, Sanders, Green, and himself, for 3 active roster spots and 1 practice squad spot. Who has 2 NFC teams reportedly interested in a trade that would give him a fresh start in a more scheme-compatible environment. And who, if he survives the cuts and earns the active roster spot and gets the one Tony Grossi predicted he would get, will spend the 2026 season being exactly what every NFL team needs on a roster where the 2 premium options at quarterback are a 30-year-old coming back from 2 surgeries and a 23-year-old who is still developing. The bridge. The floor. The professional insurance against the disaster scenario. Not a star. Not a starter. The player who knows the system, takes the snaps correctly, holds the clipboard, and is ready when the ready moment arrives. That is the truth about Dillon Gabriel's future with the Cleveland Browns. It is not the story anyone wanted him to be. But it might be exactly the story this team needs from him. And whether it ends in Cleveland or in Atlanta with Kevin Stefanski or somewhere else that the trade market eventually produces, the player who spent 6 years in college and 1 year in professional football learning how to do his job correctly is not going to disappear from the NFL quietly. The truth is not dramatic. The truth is professional. and professional, in the specific context of the most unstable quarterback room in the AFC North, is more valuable than the dismissive coverage has been willing to acknowledge. Warning: important disclaimer, please read fully. This video is produced exclusively for entertainment, discussion, and analysis purposes. All facts, statistics, quotes, and information referenced in this video are sourced from publicly available, published media sources including Cleveland Browns Community, Yahoo Sports, Yardbarker, Heavy Sports, Browns Nation, Bleacher Report, ESPN, and other credible NFL media outlets. Every quote attributed to a real individual is drawn directly from verified published articles, press conferences, and published reports. This channel does not fabricate, invent, or misrepresent any quotes, events, statistics, or factual claims. All editorial commentary, narrative framing, analysis, predictions, and opinions expressed in this video are the views of this channel alone and constitute entertainment journalism and editorial opinion only, not factual reporting or official statements from any organization. The Cleveland Browns roster decisions in quarterback competition are subject to ongoing change. This channel is not affiliated with the NFL, the Cleveland Browns, or any individual mentioned herein. All projections are speculative editorial opinion only. Viewer discretion is advised.